He watched as his guard stripped a woman in front of a crowd, tied her to wooden stakes, and poured boiling water over her skin while she screamed for mercy. He ordered musicians to play louder, so the sound of her agony wouldn't disturb the atmosphere. Then he turned to his guests and calmly explained that pain revealed whether a subject had ever lied to him. This was not rumor. These were the public punishments commanded by Ivan IV, the first Tsar of Russia, known to history as Ivan the Terrible. He beat nobles to death with his staff. He forced mothers to watch their children executed. He burned entire towns to ash because their loyalty felt uncertain. He personally guided torture sessions, carving flesh, tearing hair, and mutilating victims while priests prayed nearby. And when fear no longer satisfied him, he unleashed the Oprichniki, his private army of killers who rode black horses, wore black robes, and carried severed dog heads on their saddles to sniff out treason. Ivan's reign was not merely cruel, it was ritualized madness. He executed thousands of people in Red Square. He staged theatrical tortures that lasted for hours. He built chambers beneath his palace for interrogations, where prisoners listened to the screams of those before them. He believed violence maintained order. He believed pain revealed truth. And he believed absolute power came only through absolute terror. Ivan IV was born in 1530 into an empire collapsing under factional struggles. His father died when he was 3. His mother was poisoned when he was 8. Boyars, powerful noble families, controlled the court, beating young Ivan, starving him, humiliating him, and murdering anyone who tried to protect him. By the time he turned 16, the boy who played with dying animals for entertainment was crowned the first Tsar of Russia. He entered adulthood with traits historians now recognize as severe psychopathy, paranoia, emotional volatility, obsession with loyalty, explosive cruelty, and a total inability to trust. Ivan believed betrayal was everywhere, and that violence purified the guilty. His early rule had moments of brilliance. He modernized the military, expanded borders, and centralized power. But every success was drenched in blood. Failure turned him rabid. Doubt triggered executions. And perceived treason unleashed mass terror. When his beloved wife Anastasia died, likely poisoned, he shattered. Something inside him broke permanently. His grief transformed into an unending spiral of rage, suspicion, and sadism. He believed the boyars had murdered her, and he vowed to punish Russia until the truth revealed itself. From that moment, the man who would slaughter his own empire truly emerged. To punish an empire, he created an army of executioners unlike anything Europe had ever seen. They were called the Oprichniki, black, cloaked riders who lived only to kill in the Tsar's name. Their saddles were decorated with dog heads to symbolize how they would sniff out traitors, and brooms to show how they would sweep treason from the land. Ivan gave them absolute power. They could torture, arrest, execute, or confiscate property without trial. Their arrival in a town meant only one thing: death. The Oprichniki traveled in packs, dragging men from their homes, hanging them in marketplaces, boiling them alive, and torturing women in front of families. They burned entire villages to the ground if a single resident was accused of speaking against the Tsar. Some victims were drowned under ice. Others were tied to sleighs and dragged until their bodies tore apart. The Oprichniki turned Russia into a stage for Ivan's cruelty. The most infamous terror unfolded in Novgorod, a wealthy city Ivan suspected of plotting to defect to Lithuania. Whether the rumor was true did not matter. Ivan rode in with thousands of Oprichniki and unleashed a massacre that lasted 5 weeks. Families were rounded up, tied together, and thrown into the frozen Volkhov River. Soldiers broke the ice so the victims would sink faster. Babies were tossed into the air and impaled on spears. Priests were burned alive inside their cathedrals. Women were publicly stripped, mutilated, and left to die. An estimated 10,000 to 60,000 people were killed, many by Ivan's own hands. Chroniclers wrote that Ivan seemed possessed, laughing as the executions unfolded, personally selecting victims, circling the city like a predator inspecting a dying animal. When he returned to Moscow, he blamed the corpses for betraying the Tsar. But Ivan saved his most intimate cruelty for women. He accused newlywed wives of adultery without evidence, ordering their breasts sliced off or their tongues cut out. He raped some before killing them. He tortured nuns, stripping them naked and beating them until they could no longer walk. He forced noble women to endure hours of interrogation, then drowned them in barrels. Foreign visitors reported scenes so disturbing they refused to write them in detail, calling the Oprichnina a kingdom of hell. Ivan's paranoia grew with every passing year. He believed the devil whispered through boyars. He believed foreign powers plotted his death. He believed only terror kept Russia alive. His temper became uncontrollable. He beat servants, nobles, and even his family. And one day, in an explosion of rage, he committed the act that would haunt Russia for centuries. It happened on a hot day in 1581. Ivan's son and heir, Tsarevich Ivan Ivanovich, confronted his father about the brutal beating of a pregnant woman, the Tsarevich's own wife. Ivan had struck her so savagely that she miscarried on the spot. The young heir, horrified and furious, demanded his father stop the violence tearing their family apart. Ivan the Terrible snapped. Eyewitnesses described the scene, the Tsar's face twisted with rage, his eyes wild, his hands trembling. He seized his staff, a heavy iron-tipped weapon he carried everywhere, and struck his son across the head with full force. The blow cracked bone. Blood ran down the prince's face as he collapsed. Ivan froze, horrified at what he had done, then dropped to his knees and screamed for help. But it was too late. For days he wailed and begged God to save his son. He held the dying prince in his arms, weeping. Witnesses saw the Tsar, who had butchered thousands without remorse, reduced to a broken man. The heir died slowly, painfully, bleeding from the wound his father had delivered. With that blow, Ivan destroyed not only his child, but the future of Russia. The Tsarevich had been intelligent, disciplined, respected by the army. His death left a weak, mentally impaired brother as the only successor. The dynasty was doomed. But even this tragedy didn't stop Ivan's violence. In the final years of his reign, executions became daily rituals. He accused noble families of treason and slaughtered them entire men, women, children. He forced boyars to watch as their wives were stripped naked and beaten in public squares. He staged elaborate public tortures, ordering executioners to peel skin, burn flesh, or break limbs while crowds were forced to gather. He personally oversaw interrogations in underground chambers, where prisoners were bound to racks, stretched until their joints cracked, or whipped until their backs split open. He often prayed during torture sessions, whispering scriptures as if sanctifying the violence. Foreign ambassadors described Russia under Ivan as a land drowning in blood, where every village feared the thunder of hooves announcing the arrival of Oprichniki. People slept fully clothed in case they needed to flee in the night. Families buried valuables, hid daughters, and prayed no one would accuse them of the smallest offense. The Tsar's mood shifted unpredictably. One day he rewarded a servant, the next he killed him. He alternated between sobbing in church and ordering mass executions. Even his closest advisors feared to speak. Ivan's cruelty grew so extreme that Russia's population began to collapse. Famine spread, regions emptied. Fields remained unharvested because peasants had fled or died. His empire was rotting from the inside, and he kept striking it like a man trying to kill his own shadow. But the final chapter of his life, like everything before it, was marked by violence, paranoia, and a death as sudden as the rage that defined him. By the early 1580s, Ivan's empire was collapsing under the weight of the terror he had built. The Oprichniki, once his sacred enforcers, had grown uncontrollable, extorting villages, murdering for sport, and even defying the Tsar in small acts of arrogance. Ivan responded in the only way he knew. He executed them too, purging the very monster he created. The Oprichnina was dissolved in a storm of blood, leaving behind burned towns, mass graves, and a traumatized nation. Russia's enemies seized the opportunity. The Livonian War, which even had dragged on for decades, drained the treasury and shattered the army. Sweden and Poland advanced on Russian borders. The population shrank from famine and war. Trade collapsed. Rebellions simmered. Villages were abandoned to wolves. Entire provinces emptied as peasants fled into forests to escape taxation, conscription, or execution. Ivan didn't see the collapse as the consequence of his rule. He believed everyone around him was plotting betrayal. He rotated advisors constantly, played nobles against each other, and conducted random executions to, quote, cleanse the court. In a single week, he reportedly ordered the deaths of 30 people for minor offenses. Governors lived in fear of receiving a summons to Moscow. The journey back often ended in torture or disappearance. His paranoia intensified. He paced halls at night, muttering to himself. He accused servants of poisoning him, then forced them to taste his food before killing them anyway. He publicly humiliated priests, demanded that God justify his silence, and claimed demons stalked his chambers. Courtiers watched their ruler deteriorate into a creature fueled by suspicion and violence. And then, after decades of tormenting his empire, Ivan's reign ended suddenly. On March 18, 1584, the Tsar sat down to play chess with one of his few remaining trusted companions, Bogdan Belsky. Witnesses noted he appeared unusually cheerful, almost childlike. He laughed, joked, and spoke of plans for remarriage. Then, as he reached forward to make a move, his face twisted in agony. He collapsed to the floor. Within minutes, the man who had butchered tens of thousands lay dead. Some claimed he suffered a stroke, others whispered poison. A later exhumation found high levels of mercury in his bones, though mercury was used medicinally at the time, leaving the truth uncertain. But many believed Ivan's own rage finally consumed him. His death left Russia leaderless and broken. His surviving son, Fyodor, was mentally impaired and incapable of ruling. The empire spiraled into the time of troubles, a period of famine, war, impostors, and civil chaos. Russia bled for years because the man who claimed to protect it had spent decades destroying it from within. Ivan the Terrible's legacy is not measured in borders won or palaces built. It is measured in graves, in the thousands of victims tortured in Red Square, in the women mutilated for imagined sins, in the children burned in Novgorod, in the heir he murdered with his own hands. He ruled as if Russia were an enemy to conquer, and he conquered it through terror, ruin, and blood. History remembers him not as a father of the nation, not as a reformer, not as a visionary. It remembers a man who slaughtered his own empire and called it justice.